Hello all, welcome back. So today we're gonna look into some basics about Python. As you all know, that Python is used in various uh, uh, various applications. It could be something to do with your web applications, or desktop GUIs, or business analytics, or even in the data science part, or in other software development. So no matter what application you're working on, Python will always be using some objects or something like variables. And whenever we have variables, every variable will be associated with something called as data type. Now, so today we are going to cover more about data types, specifically to see understand what different kinds of data types do we have, and how do we use it, and how does the interpreter looks at the data types. So let us move forward about data types. Now, if you look at data type, it is basically the category of information that we're trying to store. Suppose, for example, if we walk into a store and we try to purchase say a kilo of apples. Now, if you look at kilo of apples, it could be something like 1.4, $1.5. That zero point 0.5 signifies that there is a decimal value. So when we have 1.5, and when we try to multiply with number of kgs, say 1.5 into 2, so it becomes 2 into 1.5 becomes $3. So when we look at Python's perspective, it understands that there is a float value, and when there is a float value, it is obvious that we can use this float value for mathematical purposes. The same happens with your integer data types. So all we need to remember is we have variables, and whenever we have variables and we try to store some information in that variable, that category of information is nothing but a data type. All right, so these data types will be useful for operation purposes, whether it could be mathematical operations, or it could be some transformations. So we will look at different types of data types that we have in Python, and we will also have a view on coding part. So we'll look into the code and see how the data types look. All right, so when we come to data types, we have different types of data types as we see on the screen now. So we have something like integers. It's more to do with numbers, like whole numbers, like 1, 5, 15, or -5, -10. And then we have something like float, which is nothing but a decimal value. So 1.5, 2.1, anything with number followed by decimal will be categorized as a float value. And then we have string, which is alphanumeric. And then we have booleans. Boolean is more like true or false. Uh, Also, in some cases, like when we use in Python, like 0 is considered as false, and any number above 0 is considered as true. And then we have some more typical data types like list, tuples, sets, and dictionary. Now, theoretically, like we don't have much to speak about it. So what I'll do is like I'll walk you through the code part, and I'll show you how the data types look like. Okay. Now let me go to my Visual Studio. uh, I have one .ipynb file. Now, basically, this file is like whenever we want to execute the code line by line. Like suppose we want to just execute only one line and see the output of that line, then we'll be using .ipynb. This is specifically used for your data science models, or whenever you're doing a POC. This is more easy to use than directly going into a Python file. But anyways, I'll make a separate video about how to install your Visual Studio, and how to kickstart your Python, how to run the Python in your virtual machines. Now, let us come back to data types. Now, I use something called as variable. You know, what is a variable? Now, variable is nothing but just a name. It is a name of the variable, and in that name we store any value. That value could be any of the data type. It could be as simple as an integer, or it could be something like lists or tuples. If you notice, if whenever we want to create a variable, we use a name. Say, like, let us suppose I use myvar. Now I'm initializing a variable. Now in Python, this is how you initialize a variable. You assign a value to it. Now in this case, I'll say my value is 5. So when I do it, it stores 5 in this variable. Now on top of it, I can uh, play around with myvar and apply any transformation. Say I want to add another number to it. Say I'll say I want to add number 5. Sorry, let us say I want to add number 7. And when I do it, I'll say what is my var. Let me assign it back to the same variable. So what I'm doing is we have value called 5 in my variable, and I'm adding my variable to 7, and I'm assigning this addition back to the same variable. So what happens is now this will have a value called 12. So previously it was 5. I'm adding some number to it. Now the value has got to uh, got changed to 12. So this is how you initialize. You simply have an assignment operator. This is called as an assignment operator. And once you assign it, the variable will be stored in that particular variable name. So in this case, like I'm storing a value called 5 in variable name called A. So if you want to look at the data type of this particular variable, we use something called as type, TYPE. So when I do it, it says it's an integer. Similarly, if I have a value called 5.1, and if I say type of 5.1, it will be float. So that's a prime difference. Like integer doesn't have any decimal value, and float has decimal value. If you want to look at string, like this is our favorite, hello world. So I assign hello world to variable called A, and I'm trying to look at what is the type of A, and it says it's a string. Similarly, for Boolean, it is bool, or the Boolean can be true or false. So in this case, true or false, the Boolean it shows the value called bool. Now I was mentioning something called as transformations in a couple of videos in my previous like in the previous slide that we were mentioning. So when we do some transformations, like in the previous case, I added my var, right? If my var is having a value called 12. Suppose I want to do some more transformations on top of it. Now my interpreter knows my var is an integer, correct? What if I want to add my var to some string? Say my var equal to my var plus I have a hello world here. Can can we add number 5 to alphabet A? Like physically it is not possible, right? Now that's the expected behavior. Now this should fail. We should not allow this thing to happen. So let me print my var for some reason. But anyways, it's gonna fail now. It's failed. So it says unsupported operands. These two are different data types, but we're trying to add a operator of addition to it. So this is not allowed. So what we basically should be looking at is when we want to have any transformations, could be addition, subtraction, multiplication, or any such transformations on the variable, we need to understand that the variable should be compatible enough. So in this case, because these two variables are having different data types, they are not compatible. So in order to have this transformation work, what we should be doing, we should be converting the integer to string. So to convert an integer to string, what I would be doing is my var equal to str of my var. There's a simple conversion. All right. So let me type my var now. See, I converted. Previously, it was having a value called 12, which was integer. Now I converted that integer to a string. When I look at the type of my var, now it says it is string. Now, if I repeat the same operation, now it will allow. Because my var is having a string value and hello world is a string, I can add two strings to it and I can get hello world, 12 hello world. So if you want to add, say, one more space to it, it is as simple again. So we'll simply add space on top of it and then we'll print it. So previously my var was having 12 world, so it repeated twice. That is how we have a space here. So I'll do one thing. Let me rewrite this. So my var equal to string of say 15, and then I want to assign my var equal to my var plus hello world. So we were discussing about one space. So let me add space on top of it. And finally, let me print it. Right. So we have 15 space hello world. We should always remember that variable will have the last stored information. So for example, we started myvar with 5, correct? We started myvar with 5, then we added 7. So the myvar will become 12. So after this, wherever you are using, this information will be 12. The myvar will have the information called 12. Once I use the same variable for another transformation, as in this case, I converted to string, so it became from integer, it became string. Now in this case again, I rewrote my myvar as myvar plus space plus hello world. So it became like this. So whatever is the last value, I'm gonna have the last value stored in that variable. So if I access this one more time, so I'll say myvar one more time. So my last stored value is 15 space hello world. Right? This is how we have the simple data types of integers, your floats or strings or boolean. All of them will have some expected behavior. Like integers and floats can have all mathematical operations. Strings and string can have joins and concatenation kind of transformations. Similarly, we have if we move forward, like we have bit more complicated data types like lists and tuples. So if you look at list, we have, say, we create one list, my list equal to, so list is always associated with square brackets. So this is an empty list. Now, if I type my list, if I look for the type of my list, it will say it is a list. So what we are going to do is like we can create a list, say my list 1 equal to, I have all odd numbers. Okay. Then if I say type of my list 1, so it is going to tell that it is a list. Similarly, we have something called as tuples. So my tuple, now as in the case of list, it is having a square bracket. In the case of tuples, it will be having a parenthesis. So again, we'll do the same thing. We'll have 1, 3, 5, 7, and 9, right? And then I'll say type of my tuple. When you look for it, it says it is a tuple. Now, you must have noticed some difference between a list and tuple, right? So the first simple difference is that the list is always having a square bracket and tuple is having a parenthesis. If you're in the initial phase of your career and you're joining some job as a fresher, the most obvious question that you will be asked is the difference between a tuple and list. These are two different data types. One is a tuple and one is list. So the prime difference is lists are mutable, okay, and tuples are not mutable. Because we are discussing about data types, and this is a key concept that we should always keep in mind, that lists are mutable and tuples are not mutable. So what is mutable? So if I take this value, so for example, I have my list, okay, and I try to add one value to it, say my list 1. I can add one value by using append, okay, append. I'll say value called 11, okay, then I'll say print my list 1. Say it added one number to it. This is called as mutation. We can mutate a list, we can modify a list and assign it back to the same variable. But in the case of tuples, we cannot do that. So tuple, my tuple, actually there is nothing called as append in tuple, but just for uh, demo purpose, we'll try to work it out. So I'm trying to add 11 to it, it doesn't allow. So other than append, we can also do like this. So I'll say my list 1 equal to my list 1 plus, say I have number called 13. See, I'm having two variables. Now this is a static variable. I did not define the variable. I'm having a hard-coded value. And this is my previous variable. This variable was having information like 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. I'm adding two similar data types. Now this is a list and this is also a list. If you notice a square bracket is there, this is also a list. So this is possible. And then I say print my list 1. So you can notice that I could modify my previous value and added a new value on top of it. But in the case of tuple, it is not possible. So if I do the same thing, like let me write the code, my tuple equal to my tuple plus say value of 13. Now I did the same operation here. I have a list. This is another list. So in this case, this is a tuple. There's another tuple. I'm trying to add, but this will not be allowed. Right. So this is the prime difference that we need to keep in mind, that a list is mutable, whereas a tuple is not mutable. And one more thing that you would hear is the list and tuples are ordered pair of elements. Like these are all ordered. Like when we move forward after the data types, the next session that we will discuss is how can we access a variables within the list or a tuple. So every element is associated with something called as an index. That is why it is called as ordered elements. All right. Other than list and tuples, we have dictionaries. So let me get rid of this. This is not correct. So I'll remove this. So now we have something called as dictionaries. We call it dict. So I'll say my dict equal to, my dict is associated with curly braces. So if I say type of my dict, it will be dictionary. So what I'll do is I'll try to show how a dictionary looks like. Generally, dictionaries have key and value. All right. In the case of list, there is simple elements, like these are all elements. Okay. But in the case of dictionary, we will have something called as key and value. For example, say we are saying course is Python. And say version. Oops. 3.7 or 3.9. Well, no matter what. So this is how a dictionary looks like. Course here is one of the key. Version is one of the key. Python is value. So key and value. This is one pair. This is how a dictionary looks like. So it is having a mappings. Every key will be mapped to one value or one particular data type. It could have list within that value, or it could have a tuple. Anything, like we can have any data type associated in the within this value part. So I think we are good with the basics. So what we saw today was the simple data types. So whichever application you're trying to work using Python, or no matter which object-oriented program, you will always use variables. And every time you use variable, every variable is associated with one or the other meaningful data type. Now, data types are very important because as we move forward, if we are making any transformations on top of the data type, we need to make sure that it follows a similar data type value. So for example, if we are having a variable which is an integer and we are performing some operations on top of an integer, the anticipated values, the result will also become an integer. That is how it is using the data types. Not only for this, like so for example, if we walk into some a class of students, okay, and I go and ask every student to tell the age, for example, as simple as that. So what you would be expecting? You would be expecting a number. So some would be saying say 22, some would be saying say 17 or 15 or 35 or 40. So you're expecting a number. What if every student is creative enough and he gives his own value. Say I have one student who says like my age is 17 years, 6 months, 5 days, 4 hours. Now that is also an age. Uh, it is not a wrong answer, but because you want to have some uniformity, you want to have uniformity of storing these values, we need to make sure that the data types are common. That is how we make sure in our applications, when we assign a particular value to a variable, we always make sure that they form a common pattern. That is what the data types are used for. I hope this session was helpful to you. Thank you so much.